Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. Just for everyone listening or watching, this is, we don't even know what take this is. 18 or the first recording, we had issues with it. So I couldn't put it up. It wasn't going to be good enough. So I appreciate the fact that you're taking some time again to record this.
My positions have matured since
a couple of days since Take 9. So let's just go over a few things that we had discussed. This was your first mandate.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit how that was for you. Of course, back in 2015, you were that rookie politician. Aside from having to learn different workings in government and the different committees and all that stuff, tell me a little bit, how you got accustomed to becoming the politician, challenges that you had to face, and how you overcame them.
Oh wow, big question. It could take up the whole 20 minutes. Look, I'm a guy who was born and raised in Montreal, and other than about 8 years where I worked abroad in New York City and Stockholm as a lawyer, this is my city. I studied here. I met my wife here, although she's from Sweden, now a Canadian citizen. This is the place where we wanted to raise our kids. And so coming from the private sector in the field of mergers and acquisitions, I thought I could bring a skill set to a part of the city that I know and love and feel very attached to, and even more so now. I can't even remember what I expected. This has been a complete eye-opener. You think you know your city, but the reality of it, most of us live in a bubble, and so too for me. And just discovering the diversity, the range of people that live in this riding, the challenges, you can only do that by meeting people, by talking to them and doing something that a lot of us politicians have trouble doing, which is listening.
Yeah.
So, I discovered a city that for me is the best in Canada, but also a city with a lot of challenges. Infrastructure deficit, you see these orange cones going around. They're not there for
decorate.
For aesthetics, clearly not. It's because we faced an undercapitalization in key infrastructures over more than 10 years. And this is something our government's invested in for Montreal, $330 million in social housing, and then in infrastructure, raw infrastructure, bricks and mortar type stuff, fixing wastewater projects. We've put in with public transport close to $4 billion. And so that's something we can be immensely proud of. But that's a need that Canadians wanted and Montrealers wanted, making sure people travel to work was safe, efficient, so they can get home to see their families. I've got in this riding 15 metro stations.
Wow.
It's massive. It's probably the most in Canada. And so that is top of mind to me. The income disparity was key. It is city centers, like the far north, even though city centers have fewer families in the aggregate, have the same dynamic of having on average poorer families. This riding has an average income that is above the median income, and that's a big indicator of disparity, and you see it and you feel it every day by going and meeting people.
Yeah.
So that social housing investment that I mentioned, making sure that public transport available to all was there, were key elements for me, and something that I discovered and was reinforced by having those successive conversations. And it goes to the reasons I got into this party. I wasn't a natural Liberal Party person. I had my private practice that I really enjoyed, but I got in to help the person that would then become the Prime Minister in Papineau, in a way you did, George. I did it because out of friendship, but I learned a way of interacting and meeting people and discovering both my city and my country, and in turn transforming a party in that image that is in large part thanks to the current Prime Minister that we have. And so, you see all these pictures of people going door to door and meeting people and making phone calls. They aren't cosmetic. You actually learn a lot. They can be frustrating, of course, but you get something out of them, and it directly influences policy. So, a long answer to say that I'm a guy that loves my city. Over the last 4 years, I've worked as hard as I could to make sure that people are listened to and that real action is being taken. And one day these cones will be gone, and it'll be the product of work that has, in fairness, work that has been done in cooperation with the province and Montreal.
Mm-hmm. But because you're downtown, right? And it's transforming incredibly. I mean, I'm not sure what the sentiment is here with the people. I mean, St. Catherine, for example, is transforming. I think today the mayor of Montreal came out and said that she's reducing speed limits downtown. There's a lot of changes focused on the downtown core area. How are people reacting to this? How are they resonating to all of that?
You know, a lot of it is cautious optimism, frankly. In St. Henry, which we just, we drove a little through Burgundy and came back through here, and now we're heading down towards Griffintown. Griffintown having the largest demographic explosion
for sure.
on the island of Montreal since 2011. So that's clearly a phenomenon that a lot of people point to. Some people say unbridled development, but you also see gentrification in parts of my riding, including Point St. Charles, Little Burgundy that we just drove through, and St. Henry. You see, and that with that comes what I'd mentioned earlier in income disparity. Mm-hmm. So the job of the federal government is, and something we did for the first time in a generation, is to make those investments in public housing and to reform something that needed serious and deep reform in the Canada Child Benefit, which was benefiting millionaires and not necessarily those who needed it most. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we did first off was to ask those that make the most in society to pay a little more, cut the income tax level for the middle class, and invested heavily in families that do need it most. And for the riding that I have the honor of representing, that represents more money for 12,000 children and families. And that has been a key driver in taking 900,000 people out of poverty, including 300,000 children. And that's the job of any politician to focus on those that are vulnerable.
And you're continuing down that path, right? I mean, in this platform, you mentioned Justin Trudeau announced that he's going to increase the lowest non-taxable income to $15,000. So there's a lot of measures that you're going to continue based on the last 4 years that you were governing.
Well, that's right. And so the Canada Child Benefit that I'd mentioned was increased in June, and will be increased again pursuant to our platform should Canadians choose to re-elect us. And the income tax measure that we instituted is the result of smart policy. So for people making a little under $150,000, the minimum deductible amount will be $15,000, so raised up, and it'll represent a savings for families and those that need it most. Mm-hmm. If you contrast that to the Conservative so-called universal tax cut, mm-hmm. where everyone gets a tax cut, someone making $400,000 will get a better deal than someone making $40,000, which I feel isn't fair, and it gets couched in terms that are geared towards those who need it most. But the reality is those who make most will benefit most, and that's not fair.
Tell me a little bit about the feedback you're getting from the ground. You've been elected obviously for 4 years. You haven't just started campaigning. This whole year as it started, you've been on campaign mode pretty much. Tell me a little bit about the messages you're getting from the ground. Also the fact that this year, it didn't really start off on a good note, right? You had a series of resignations, some scandals, ethics violations. Did that at all change your strategy in preparation to the election? How was it on the ground when all these things came up this year?
Well, generally the sentiment is good. We have a record, like you mentioned, that we are running on. That is, we are the incumbent party. So people are going to put up the successes and the disappointments in our face, and we do need to account for that. My job is to be accountable to the people that put me in place, and they have every right to take me out should they so choose. Clearly, some of the challenges are the result of a maturing process in government that we faced. We had a very long honeymoon period, a very successful period of renegotiating NAFTA with a very, very tough partner to the south of us. But clearly, at some points, there were issues that needed to be addressed within the party, as regards the way the Prime Minister's office communicated with cabinet ministers, with caucus members, and in some cases, it got to the point where the presence of two of those senior cabinet ministers was no longer tolerable within caucus. Mm-hmm. These things are unfortunate. There's a lot to be learned from those experiences. The Prime Minister, even before final decisions were made, was already acknowledging that work had to be done in the way that his office did business, and testified to the breakdown in communication that can occur. I give him credit. I give him modest credit for recognizing that and addressing that from the get-go. There are many caucus members that don't feel listened to. They need that opportunity. One of the more quiet elements of this type of pluralistic democracy that we have is the work that's done quietly inside caucus. It's outside scrutiny from the media, but for a very important reason, is so that people who represent their ridings can express themselves freely and directly to the Prime Minister.
So what kind of impact did that have locally? I mean, you've met a lot of your citizens. In the beginning of the year, there were issues that were raised pertaining to respect towards women, and the whole feminist issue, and he was criticized of being a fake feminist. Did you hear any of that on the ground meeting your citizens?
Not so much. I always scratch my head with that statement. It usually came from partisan sources, because we have a great number of strong women in cabinet, in caucus, that are fierce advocates, and they don't question the Prime Minister's feminism at all. I think of my colleague Pam DeMoff. I think of Carolyn Bennett, who I've had the honor of working with over the last year directly. I think of Chrystia Freeland, who was so instrumental in those NAFTA renegotiations. So, it is, these issues always drag into partisan finger pointing at some point. It doesn't mean that there isn't at sometimes the need to take a look at what's going on and to reform the way that the Prime Minister communicates and his office communicates with the people that are so important, getting him there, including his team. What I've heard on the ground, for the most part, is support for the Prime Minister, support for the things that he has implemented, that we have implemented as a team over the last 4 years. It doesn't come without criticism at some point, and my job is to listen to that criticism when it comes, and take it back and be a fierce advocate in caucus for it. Sometimes I can't even tell the people that have talked to me that I've advocated for them, because I have to keep the caucus secrecy. But there are some poignant moments at the doors when people tell me stuff, and I say, look, I respect your view. What is it that you'd like me to say to the Prime Minister? And they tell me, and I've given that feedback. Yeah, and that's my job. I should never feel that my job is on the line because I am afraid to say something. It's something that represents the truth. And that's my job, and that's why I'm given such a good salary to represent people here.
Let's talk a little bit about the platform. There was a big movement last week. There was a huge demonstration for the environment. Some estimates go as far as to suggest that there were 500,000 people. Obviously, there's a lot of members of the Liberal Party present. I'm just curious to know who, if you ever get elected, will be hired to count 2 billion trees that will be planted across Canada. I want to know the person that's going to be lucky to get that job.
A lot of us can't count to 10, so sure. Look, this is a great announcement. Trees and planting of trees have been proven to capture carbon. They are a natural way of addressing the pressing issue of our time, which is carbon dioxide emissions. There are parties, including the Conservative Party, elements of which deny climate change. Other parties are offering solutions that need to be examined. I would love this to be a nonpartisan debate. I would love this to be a debate about who has the best plan for the environment. I think about my friend Stephen Guilbeault, who has a riding adjoining mine, who has fought fiercely with Équiterre and over the years for environmental causes. He says there's no one-stop solution, and he's right. We've put a price on pollution, which is being contested by right-wing premiers in courts. It's been proven to work in Alberta, rather in BC, and in Quebec. Remember that 4 years ago, the federal government was catching up to progressive provinces, and that was our end. We've caught up. We're in some cases ahead of the game and being dragged into court on others on our jurisdiction. We respect people's rights to go and contest us in front of the courts, but the reality is that work needs to be done for the environment. So a price on carbon, fixing methane regulations, an oceans protections plan that we've put $1.5 billion into to make sure that our oceans are protected. Doubling the protected area on land in Canada is key, along with green fund investments, and I think, and most notably of even smaller, more modest investments in McGill, at making sure the way they heat McGill actually reduces carbon dioxide emissions by the equivalent of 2,000 households, 9,000 metric tons. All these initiatives that need to be put in place to make sure that the issue of our generation is faced. And those people that showed up, 500,000 people, including a lot of kids, they're asking that we do more. So that planting 2 billion trees reflects that. Making sure that we continue those investments, give tax breaks to clean tech sector businesses that want to get into to a huge economy. I invite people listening to this to Google an article called the $70 billion plan that no one has heard of. And it includes our plan to invest $26 billion in green infrastructure, $26+ to invest into green initiatives, the $2 billion funds for clean tech. There are a suite of measures, including, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. We governing for a country that has an extractive economy. We can't leave our brothers and sisters in Alberta behind as we encourage transition. And so buying a pipeline that is safer than transporting by car.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. How do you respond? You see, there's all these environmental issues that you're addressing, and at the same time, the environmentalists have criticized you for buying that pipeline, which, by the way, it's costed about $5 million. By the time it's put into work and by the time everything is functional, some experts are suggesting that it might even reach $9 million. How do you respond to that kind of criticism?
Well, there's no denying that we are a net exporter of extractive products. We have an economy that is fueled by the extractive industry, and when we talk about transition, we need to talk about a just transition. Making sure that that those products are taken to market in a way that is safer than rail cars is smart. We're talking about an investment and not simply a cost. There is value in that pipeline. I don't propose that a government should all the time be in the business of owning pipelines, but we've undertaken as a government to invest any profits into green initiatives,
green technologies, yeah.
And by accounts that can range to several $100 million a year. We will inevitably face that criticism, but we do have to govern for the entire country. And I don't believe in leaving my brothers and sisters in Alberta behind.
Do you think that, Andrew Scheer has proposed, I can't remember exactly how he called it, but it's basically a green tunnel or a green gateway to transport resources, whether they're natural resources or pipelines or whatever, across Canada from coast to coast. From your party's perspective, is there any possibility that we will see pipelines coming towards Quebec or eastward?
This is a case of Andrew Scheer picking his pandering, and he has said multiple times he will respect jurisdictions, will respect provincial jurisdictions, until he wants to ram a pipeline down people's throats. We have a robust review mechanism in the National Energy Board that we fixed in order to take a look at private proposals. The reality that Energy East didn't go forward was because the business case was no longer there. Whether you talk about the business case, it largely being supplanted by the approval of Keystone and Trans Mountain, the business case simply wasn't there. So, other than the opportunistic doublespeak that I see coming from the leader of the Conservative Party, there are issues of real business issues. What that flow of extracted material would go to, where it would get refined. A lot of the stuff that is coming out of that party is historic. He talks about Saudi Arabia oil going into Quebec, which is false. The reversal of the 9B line reversed, or at least fixed, a lot of the disparity that you saw between East and West in terms of how how oil flows. Oil is in terms of its flow in a commercial setting internationally is complex. There are some refined materials that come in from different countries. Canadian dilbit, as they call it, is exported to U.S. refineries and re-imported. That is just the nature and complex nature of international trade that is reflected as well in the oil industry. Mm-hmm. So he would have to put together a proposal, and this is speculation on my part, but he would have to put together a proposal that would actually make business sense. And, over and above some of what I see as the opportunistic doublespeak, there's a business case here that just makes very little sense.
Mm-hmm. We're going to close it up soon. I know you're busy. I want to talk about the debate that happened this week. It was the first
last
night. Yeah. I'm not sure when this episode will air. Probably tomorrow. So, the first leaders debate. It was in French. There were some hot topics there. I just want to get your thoughts on, in general. And I don't know, it's hard to be objective because you're obviously going to support your leader, but
I got a shout out from the bloc leader. I don't know if you heard that.
No, I didn't. Well, yeah, during the debate. Yes. You came under fire for Bill 21 there. But just as objectively as you can, what are your thoughts on the debate? How do you think the leaders performed?
Well, I think people saw some debates of substance over issues that Quebecers in particular want to talk about. What you did see on the whole, other than Andrew Scheer's proposals, were progressive proposals and discussions on values. I saw the Prime Minister that I know and recognize. I saw a Prime Minister that is willing to stand up for all Quebecers, all Canadians, and someone that is willing to assume the consequences of his policies, whether people like them or not. I think people derive a lot of comfort in that, in knowing who Justin Trudeau is and what to expect out of a Prime Minister that they've seen for the last 4 years. So I'm quite proud of the way he debated. I think that Mr. Blanchet expressed himself well and eloquently. Jagmeet Singh did so as well. His French was quite good. And so I was impressed. This is a bilingual country. English and French have equal status, and mm-hmm. It's great to see leaders put such effort into speaking in French, because we're talking about people that have that as a mother tongue, not only in Quebec but across Canada, and whether it's Acadians, whether it's Franco-Ontarians, Franco-Albertans, Franco-Manitobas, there's real element of pride in your identity as expressed in language, and people want to hear and expect their leaders to be capable in those languages. So I actually like the French debates because for me it embodies what I see as Canada, which is a beautiful country characterized by 2 official languages. And I give them all credit for making the effort, even those who don't speak as well, because I do know that they make that effort, and we face that even as a party within caucus, encouraging our colleagues to speak, and conversely those that have a little more trouble with English to work on that.
One of the issues there during the debate that was really highly debated was Bill 21. Obviously, François Blanchet, being from the Bloc Québécois, who has supported that provincial bill here in Quebec, I think he seemed to be the only one pretty much supporting it during the debate. Now, the campaign started and all the leaders were kind of, uncomfortable towards that new bill in Quebec. And then finally, Justin Trudeau is the only one that kind of left the door open to challenging it. Is it really going to happen? What are your thoughts? I mean, should you guys get elected, are you going to look into this Bill 21, to the whole application or the applicability of the notwithstanding clause? And of course, it's being contested now in Quebec, so of course we don't know what's going to happen. What are your thoughts on that, on Bill 21?
Well, you touch on a really important point, George. And again, it doesn't, no matter what Justin Trudeau thinks, no matter what Monsieur Legault thinks, at the end of the day, a court will decide. That said, it is irresponsible for any person aspiring to be Prime Minister to close the door on the federal government intervening in an issue of particular importance to Canadians. We're talking about the suspension of very fundamental rights. Look at this riding and the people that could be potentially affected that would become second-class citizens. Look at the profound issues of discussion on the place of religion within the Constitution. Mr. Blanchet called me out last night, but the only thing I'm guilty of is knowing the Constitution that he wants to rip in half. So this is something that the Canadians are profoundly touched by. This isn't about disrespecting jurisdiction, which is properly provincial, and that of the Quebec government and the government of François Legault. I have deep respect for him and his jurisdiction and the Quebecers that he serves. But this is about standing up for minorities, for women, and everyone expects the Prime Minister to do so. It's important to note that our Constitution is a very complex document. Provincial governments have us in court over the price on pollution. And so this is something that is done. It isn't done as a matter of course. It's done with some seriousness, but we would not ask them not to intervene. This is a right that you have under the Constitution, and they, in their own right, in their decision, are taking decisions for the best interest of people that were elected to get there. So I have no particularly quarrel, even if you take someone into court with that government. It's a respectful disagreement that the courts will decide between two mature levels of government.
You also came under fire a couple of weeks ago with respect to a recent nomination that was made for an honorary consul of Syria. Last time we spoke, and obviously that episode didn't air because of the problems we had, but I'm curious to see the developments in that. You had mentioned to me that Chrystia Freeland was going to make a decision. This is an individual who seems to have very close ties to the Assad regime. He was in your riding. He had participated at a fundraising event where I believe Justin Trudeau was present as well. This is where all the issue had started. Is there any developments in that?
His honorary consulate was revoked. He had expressed some very strong opinions in, I believe, Maclean's magazine about the white helmets and various views that were very abhorrent, in my view, pro-Assad. This is a person that I had met in the charitable context for the Syrian community. The Syrian community is very near and dear to my heart because my office has been working relentlessly to help some of the 50,000 refugees that have come here integrate, and some of the challenges they have, and they've turned to our office, and it's been a real honor to serve them. So that included attending charitable events, in one case with the mayor of Montreal at the time at Notre Dame Cathedral. He was one of the organizers along with the Syrian Cultural Center. So I'd known him in very much a charitable context. We had very, very few conversations, mostly around those initiatives. And he was invited to a fundraiser and contributed. And then this was to my, he's a Canadian, so he's entitled to donate. And he did donate to an event I held, I think in 2017. So he would have been on the list of people contacted for when the Prime Minister came. The suggestion is that people get something for their donations, which is, it's preposterous. There's no way any member of Parliament would be influenced by a donation. The limit is $1,600. This event was much less. So, but all you're entitled to is at these events is a picture. People know that, and they know that they're not to discuss elements of things. But you're in the business of meeting people. As a member of Parliament, you meet everyone. You don't do forensic audits on them. Yeah. And it is that engagement for me is not going to stop with the Syrian community. They're rich in their diversity, rich in their views. They have political views that differ, but they will be Canadians that will contribute to Canadian society. So. These events do happen, and everyone that is a member of Parliament is in the business of meeting people.
Yeah. Let's close it up. I know you got to get back to campaigning. Anything you want to tell the people listening, residents that are living in your riding? There's about 2 weeks left into the campaign.
19 days.
So you're in the last stretch.
Well, look, I'll leave this off on a nonpartisan note. It's so important for a pluralistic democracy for people to go out and express their will, and that means writing their choice on a piece of paper for who they want to represent them. I do hope that's me. But even if it isn't, get out there, vote. Vote for who you feel would best represent this part of Montreal that I know and love. It's so fundamental to being Canadian and participating in the best country in the world. So everyone, on October 21st, get out and vote. If you can't, and you're in my riding, you can head out to the advance polls, which are happening over Thanksgiving. If you have better things to do over Thanksgiving, you can vote anytime. In fact, across from the IGA in St. Henry, right beside St. Henry Metro, you just have to go in and write the name down on the ballot, and that will count. So get out there, vote, and enjoy being in the best country in the world.
I appreciate it, Marc. Good luck with everything, and I'll be following very closely the results on the 21st there.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, I will. All right.